Well, the U.S. is juggling a difficult position. They are on a tightrope between showing countries all over the Middle East that they are supporting their allies, whomever these allies are. So in that sense, the U.S. has a vested interest in continuing to support Israel. But at the same time, there is a outrage within the Democratic Party, young people mainly, and a national poll released just today showed that Biden is in trouble in a number of key states. And so domestically, the U.S. administration, the Biden administration, is in a bit of a trouble, even though it's a year long to wait and so much can happen. So the U.S. will have to juggle both imperatives, and Israel is facing the problem of, on one hand, wanting to destroy Hamas capabilities, and on the other, knowing that at some point the Americans will say no more, and that will likely stop the military campaign, possibly before Israel has reached its objectives.
Indeed, and the key question here is exactly how long is the US willing to hold out as Israel pushes on with its ground operation in Gaza and as hostages' lives hang in the balance. But Eyal, to another point, there's also a very big difference between a humanitarian pause and a ceasefire. There seems to be a lack of clarity on both sides about what either of those things actually mean. Is either a near-term prospect in your view?
Well, Israel started off by trying to kind of impose what they call the full curfew or siege, complete siege, on thinking that this might help their cause in relation to outrage in the Gaza Strip against the Hamas, and then realized that they made a mistake, and now they're kind of pushing for opening more. Or allowing more humanitarian support for the south of Gaza Strip. But in terms of the differences between a humanitarian pause and a ceasefire, Israel is concerned about this idea of a ceasefire, which will take a longer period, supposedly to try and allow for hostages negotiation, but at the same time fearing very much that if such a ceasefire was agreed on, they will not be allowed, so-called allowed later on, to continue their military campaign. At the same time, the two objectives of the Israelis of, on one hand, destroying Hamas capabilities and at the same time releasing the hostages are incompatible, because at some point, unless there is some agreement on the hostages, then the lives of the hostages are all but assured.
Secretary Blinken also says there must be a new reality for Gaza after this war, and it's pretty clear now that the status quo cannot hold. That's the message from Arab leaders, despite a lack of Arab leadership on this issue. What do you think the future looks like for Gaza and the people of Gaza if this war comes to a close soon, we hope?
Well, it's a big question. It sounds like the Americans are pushing for a meaningful and after so many decades, serious international intervention to push the side, and mainly Israel, into painful concessions. But it's also sounding like the current Israeli government, which may not survive after the end of the military campaign, is fighting back against the idea of any administration in the future that will involve the Palestinian Authority, currently in control of the Palestinian parts of the West Bank. So whether or not something will happen, I think it will depend on not only replacing the Palestinian leadership in Gaza, but also replacing the currently radical extremist Israeli government that is holding back on these potentially painful concessions and risks.